When you go talk to the subcontractors, are you asking them to resubmit schedules? Are you asking them to validate their schedules? How do those specific conversations work? Because that's where I see a lot of things fall apart sometimes, is there's that disconnect between owner, GC, subcontractors. And if someone's already been kicked off site, there's probably a culture that is not healthy, I would probably argue. So just real quick before we move on, what are you tactically doing to kind of get their information back refreshed and kind of repair that bridge? Welcome to the Beyond Deadlines podcast, where we tackle challenges that planning and schedule leaders come across on a day-to-day basis. My name is Micah, and I'm a scheduling manager for Intel.
My name is Greg Lawton. I'm the CEO of an AI schedule management company called Nodes and Links.
And I'm Matt Kilgore, working for a top 25 E&R design build company.
Excellent. Welcome to the show, Matt. Are you ready to be on the hot seat?
Yeah, I suppose. Let's do this.
Great. Well, here at Beyond Deadlines, we aim to give you tactics and strategies that you can use right away. Today's challenge has to do with a GC replacement. So, Matt, here's the scenario. You're working on a site and the previous general contractor was removed for poor performance. The schedule is 6 months behind. You are now the director of scheduling who's been tasked to get the project back on track. They've parachuted you in and you're here for recovery. How do you do it?
Wow, 6 months. That's in manufacturing, that's a big deal. I guess starting off as we usually do, a couple of questions. So what's behind the 6 months? Is it the finish date or mid milestones along the way, or what's defining that 6 months delay?
Should we give him a shot at actually pulling it in, Greg, and say it's something early in the project, or should we tell him that like commissioning has gone completely sideways? There's no hope for recovery. What should we do here?
No, let's make it relatively okay. Let's say that we're actually building a manufacturing plant. I don't know, a BF plant or a chip plant or something like that. And at the moment, they've got foundations in place. They were just about to lay utilities, and it is the first delivery date, so the manufacturing plant up and running, so after commissioning and handover. So let's say we're 20% of the way through the project, end delivery milestone is 6 months delayed, and also let's say it was a 2.5 year project. Mike, okay. What do you think? 2 or 2.5 year?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's say 2 years. Let's make it harder.
Okay. So in manufacturing and in complex projects, buildings, there's many different critical paths in a lot of areas where that could be the problem. If it's a 6 months delay at the end of the job, that probably, in being manufacturing, that means the customer may have the equipment as well. So is the delay critical path going through the building items now, whereas the general contractor, they had control of it, or is it more of the customer's equipment or equipment that they're purchasing? Where is can I ask where that critical path is?
Of course you can. These are beautiful questions. Okay, so the general contractor got fired for poor performance. So let's say it's the general contractor's problem, and let's say two things. So let's say that their foundations and utilities are behind, and let's say they're supposed to be 30%, but they're only 20%. And let's also say that they're massively behind on permits, which is delaying other work.
And I was just going to add in, since Greg and I are acting as the owner, all of your equipment that we purchased is sitting in a shed across the street. So you have you cannot blame me whatsoever.
All right. So I think I guess the thing that we would focus on first is knowing that the foundations and the site work are issues. If the permits are related to buildings, if the permits are related to building issues, then, we would want to be digging into, okay, where are the drawings on? We're sitting down with the building department, finding out what exactly do you need to have now. Does the design firm work for me as well? or is that working? Are they working for the customer?
Let's say that they're a third party hired by us, the client, but we've instructed them to strongly work with you.
Okay. Well, I think first we'd want to, if the issue is permits, dig into the details of the permits, find out what is it that we need to provide, what can we get moving on, where are my limitations? 6 months, when we're in foundations and site work, there's a lot that has to get done. So we would really have to focus in on what are the things that we can do now, and then reevaluate what are the different things that are near critical to figure out if later on we can recruit some of this time through other areas. Again, manufacturing, there's lots of different components, a lot of different things that come together for a manufacturing type facility. So, you could focus on areas that are not permitted, restricted, and try to get as much of those things done. But really, manufacturing is so complex, it would take a lot of digging into the details of what the issues are for permits.
Then let me throw in a little spanner to the mix. So we've assumed at this point that we're using critical path methods, so deterministic critical path method, and we've said that it's a SIP. At the start, we never actually said. So I'm going to flip it up, and I'm going to say, well, what if the client said, well, actually, the way that we've calculated that end date is we've taken the P70 position of a Monte Carlo simulation. How would you then put a strategy around that?
I would say, is the issue with the P7 or the P70 related to the current issues, or would you give me a better definition on what the
So they did an initial assessment where they ran a Monte Carlo simulation and it produced a date 24 months into the future.
Well, let
And
me
then
ask a question on that, Greg, just so we're on the same page, or Swiss Micah, whoever I want to call you. Did the owner have a schedule previously built either by the GC or the owner that they're running the P70 against? That's like the baseline schedule?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Yes. Let's say that a detailed schedule was submitted by the last contractor, which is what got them awarded the contract.
Yeah. And then that's what they ran the P70 off of.
Yes.
And that's what picked the end date. And then it's 6 months past that end date. Yes,
right now. And what they've done is obviously activities have slipped, which is redone. And they've rerun the analysis with the same inputs, and it is now producing a P70 date of 6 months later.
So fix it, Matt. Help us. Your only hope.
So I think first off, I guess you've got to sit down with the subcontractors. I'm assuming that we're going to pick up and contract with the same subcontractors to try to maintain, try to get an understanding of where they believe they need to get to, where they're at, what were the problems? Was it material issues, problems? Is it labor issue problems? And try to control on the immediate issue where we're at. And then later on, and then once we've got the current flow back closer, obviously we're not going to make up 6 months in foundations and site work. A lot of that pickup is going to have to be looking at the building itself and the equipment and seeing what we can do to try to overlap some of those activities and make the probability, make that timeline get shortened.
How granular would you go with your tracking of that foundation work? You say get a handle on it. Let's say they just have like a high level P6 schedule. They got 80 activities in there for each kind of section of, pour and set and those sorts of things. But would you go any further to understand what your productivity rates are?
Yeah, to some degree, because we want to show the customer that we're, honestly, foundations and site work, although important, a lot of people believe that that's the root of, if that's late, everything's late. But the reality is that early activities in your projects are not what's driving that probability that where we're at the end of the job is going to have so much impact by what you do now. So what you're doing now is only trying to give the customer faith. Hey, here's where we're at, but here's where we're going to be, and we'll be able to improve some of that. You're not going to make up 6 months in these activities. So really what you're doing now is just to give faith to the customer, we're going to do better. The reality of that improvement on that probability and bringing things 6 months in is going to be stuff that you're not doing probably even this year. If we're talking about this time frame now, it's something that's 60%, 70% into the project. Because right now you're probably only at 5 or 6%. So really what you're just trying to do, give faith now, but the real focus of getting better is going to come much later in that schedule.
Gotcha. And then when you're practically, so one more before you jump in, Greg, when you go talk to the subcontractors, I mean, are you asking them to resubmit schedules? Are you asking them to validate their schedules? How do those specific conversations work? Because that's where I see a lot of things fall apart sometimes, is there's that disconnect between owner, GC, subcontractors. And if someone's already been kicked off site, there's probably a culture that is not healthy, I would probably argue. So just real quick before we move on, what are you tactically doing to kind of get their information back refreshed and kind of repair that bridge?
Well, I think we would sit down with the different trade partners and look at what their plans are. Odds are most trade partners don't have a detailed scheduler, perhaps. So it's just getting understanding where they are, because ultimately it's on our side. It's our site teams, it's our project management teams, it's our schedulers that are going to develop, okay, here's what we've got, here's how we would do it. I don't know, the general contractor, the previous guy, he might have a real weird sequence of how things go together. So we're really sitting down, how would we do this? See where they are and try to kind of bring them together and say, this is what our thoughts are. Here's what you were doing. Here's try to blend it together so that we can have those other trade partners that have to come later, make sure they are as satisfied with where we're at before they get started. So it's a little bit of, we have to have our plan. We can't have the subcontractors control everything because we've got 40 different contractors. We got to make sure that they're all happy with what they got to get going. And that's the kind of where the general contractor comes involved.
You mentioned about not being able to pull it in by 6 months there. And let's say I was being a very hard client. Let me add a little bit more detail as well. So let's say on the last contractor, the actual deterministic schedule was 18 months, but the P70 added 6 months onto the end of it. So they had 6 months of contingency and they got fired because they burned all of their contingency in the first 20%. Let's say that the deterministic date now is 24, but the P70 is pushing that out by 6 months. Would you, what would you say if I came to you and I was like, what do you think about this? Do you think P70 is the right one to take? Like, what should we get as a client? What should we get straight in our head as to when do you think, Matt, this project will finish?
That's a good question. And it's a hard question because there's so many variables with that. I guess it would be, let's talk to the customer, find out what is the true necessity. If we're talking about 100% of a facility, maybe there's some areas that, hey, we don't have to store whatever is we're manufacturing. We just need to be able to say that we're running online to meet our investors, so it's probably looking at more mid milestones and to find better what is that what is the essentials to get that product out the door, whatever it is.
Oh, that's a very interesting one. So let's say that we're doing a beer brewery. I'll do a brewery. Let's say that I say, well, my milestone is that I want to get my first hops in. I want to produce my first bottle. I don't need the bottling line. I don't need the 70 things. I just need to produce beer so that I can have it on show to say we're moving forward. So, let's say that instantly you've saved me 4 months.
I would say, well, obviously I'm the contractor. Yes, we can get that done. But I think,
and that's it for Beyond Deadlines today, folks.
No, I think, I think getting that defined will be much better. I think you try to pull that schedule out and then focus on that. And then, you still can't forget about those other areas that have to get done. But I think you can focus on those, focus on that area and kind of get with the subcontractor, say, okay, this is now our focus. What do you have for manpower? What do you need for equipment? What do you need for these focused areas? And then, if we need to rob Peter to pay Paul to get those other areas done, then we kind of balance that out. But I think you really focus on, really get the contractors and get an understanding of what is the restrictions of this specific area, and then get into what can we be of accommodating and what do we need more of.
No, I'm going to take a sidestep from the question here to actually just say something I really like that you've just discussed, and for listeners we'll do a little bit of a summary, but this is what I've heard, which is let's say 2 or 3 things. Number one is you didn't just jump in and say yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full. You came in and said, I'm actually going to properly investigate and find out, because you're, as the 3 of us know, you're playing a fool's errand if you promise something without knowing the details of how you're going to deliver it. The second thing is you actually focused on the short term about getting things done properly in the short term, because work still has to get done on a day-to-day basis. And if people are sitting around and things aren't progressing, it compounds the problems down the line. So there's that. Then there's also the third element just there, which is the longer term strategy, where we were pushing down the line, but about the intermediate milestones, where that is essentially a hack of where you can take a specific end date and break it up so that you can achieve success over multiple milestones. And then obviously it comes. So for me, those are the 3 things that I really liked from what you just discussed.
Yeah, because I think contractually we never like to have those mid milestones, because as a customer, because I used to be a customer as well, those mid milestones are so debatable on how they're defined and how they can get to it, that when you have restrictions at those milestones, it becomes a very us versus them point at some point. So I think just kind of opening up right away from the customer, saying, okay, I understand this is what your date is for whatever that mid milestone is, but those are just guidelines to whether or no we are on the right track. The key is getting to that final point. But when you start to look at what is really important, that's what you need to discuss and have concern with the customer as far as these other areas, and what do you need to have done, and then we'll focus on that.
That makes a lot of sense. What if, as you work through this process, you run into a subcontractor that doesn't want to play ball? You run a difficult group of individuals that just They don't want to give you schedule information. The schedule information they give you isn't great, and it's really starting to hamper your efforts.
You know, I first I would want to know what's the history of that subcontractor. You know, are they a local that, you know, they were brought online because that's, you know, we're trying to enhance the local environment, or was this a general contractor's the original guy's subcontractor, or is this a customer? Sometimes a customer says, hey, we like this person because they take care of our electrical, or their maintenance guy. So you kind of have to know the history of who that trade partner, how they were brought along before you really try to manage how you're going to deal with them. Obviously, we want to make sure that trade partners are people that we've worked with, because we have a comfort level and know where we can push the buttons and, you know, where we can't push the buttons. So I would have to know, what was that original relationship starting from? From there, then you can decide, you know, do I give them, you know, we've got this critical area and this non-critical area. Maybe we keep them on the non-critical areas and we kind of supplement their work with the critical areas with somebody that we're comfortable with, because we know that's important. This guy's going to be that way. You know, maybe we still give them some puzzle pieces. Maybe they're a bad apple altogether and it's so sour, we got to, you know, throw that apple away and start over.
Mm-hmm.
That has complexities in itself. But you know, that subcontractor, there's probably a reason why they're a bad apple, and you know, we got to get to the root cause of that.
What I'm hearing is some hard-fought experience here.
Yeah, done it a few times. It's not a fun exercise, but you know, it is the necessity of the world today. So
okay, so let's fast forward, and let's say that we're now 80% of the way through the project. We're just about to kick off, you know, full commissioning of main assets, and the customer, and let's say we pulled it back because of these min milestones. So it was an arrangement. They're happy with what's said, and they say, look, we've got plans for another 3 factories. How do we make sure that those other 3 go as well as this one went? How would you start to put in a system of legacy, a system of learning?
So yeah, I think and we see that a lot. We see a lot of repeat customers. I mean, that's the goal of every general contractor. It's easy to sell work to the guy that you've been working with. Person, I should say. I would say we want to show them, you know, hey, here's what we did. Here's how we did it better. Sit down and figure out, okay, what are the factors of this new manufacturing facilities? You know, will we have the same permitting issues that we had before? Are we using a different subcontractor base? You know, I think you'd have to really sit down and look at what were the issues, countermeasure those issues, and then we can figure out what, you know, how successful will we be. But you know, there's a lot of variables that caused it to go wrong, and we just need to look at those lists of items and figure out, okay, here's what the issues were, and here's how we're not going to do those. Subcontractors is a good place where things can quickly get out of hand. So, you know, I think that's where it sounded like this problem is the base that we had for subcontractors. And permitting, you know, obviously permitting is different everywhere in the US, in Europe. Every jurisdiction has its nuances, so really need to know what the permit issues were specifically.
Beautiful.
When you look at that plan of how you do it differently, how would you package that up to the owner to sell it to them, to say, these are the 3, 4, 5 things that we're going to execute differently, and this is how we're going to do it?
Every customer is a little bit different, but I think you really want to, you know, pull back your schedule, give them a very nice little, here's the 3 things that worked well. You know, whether they are sophisticated enough where they just give them the schedules and their schedules go, and you know, dig into the details. Usually it's just sitting down with a customer and just chatting through it. A lot of customers, they like that. They don't like the 20, 30 PowerPoint slides, showing, hey, here's countermeasure 1, slide 2, here's how the problems were resolved. I think it's really just a conversation with that group, giving them the discussing through what the issues were.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, I'm going to say here, I think that this is, I think this works on different levels. So I would say with there's a number of customers. So when we talk about chatting through, what that says to me is it's the principle of relationship and it's the principle of emergence. They don't know what they want to ask. Just like, to be honest, Micah and I don't know what we want to ask in one of these episodes until we get in the episode and hear the response, and then you want to go through that circle, and each person will have a different line at which point they want to get to a level of comfort, which means that it's quite emotional. When obviously you're talking about big government frameworks, or you're talking about very big client organizations that are highly advanced, requirements-based engineering comes into it to a large extent. So let's say that we're going that direction. We want to, everything has to go out to an open tender, etc. How would you help me position so that I know that you're the best choice?
Just going back and looking at presenting how our our experience has shown. Some customers are very sophisticated and they've got teams that are construction managers, so they're going to know a lot more and they'll be able to dig into it, and know where you're lying to them or faking the information. But I think to some degree, getting that personal one-on-one relationship with the essential people, I think does help get a comfort level, a trusting, just based on sitting down and talking that whatever they know, if they're got a strong manufacturing group, a strong construction group, then you talk to that construction group to the level that they know. In manufacturing, sometimes it's, hey, I don't know how to do a building at all. So then you're just kind of relating it to them, making it relatable to the areas, to the detail that they understand. But, in both cases, slides and slides of information, to your point on previous podcasts, here, keep it brief, keep it short, but I think the relationship long-term is built upon what you say and how you act to people as opposed to what you present to them in front of them.
I do like that a lot. It's based in true evidence.
Yeah. In manufacturing, manufacturing is so diverse in terms of how projects are delivered or how they're contracted and how they're awarded. And I think that's why it's important to have that communication, just to sit down and understand what they need, because they're not going to have a list of checklists of these are the things you have to show to me. They like to make widgets. They don't like to make the buildings that make the widgets.
So what you just said there is a very, very spot on point. Actually, I think for everyone listening to this, we've sometimes got to remember that projects are an evil necessity. No one does a project because they want to do a project. People do projects because they want the thing that the project delivers at the end of the day. And in this case, we can talk about, there's a lot of education and managing of clients, because if you're incredibly skilled at building manufacturing, it's not always the case that the client is incredibly skilled at building the manufacturing. They might be incredibly skilled at understanding how to operate the thing you're building, but not building the thing you're building. So I think there's the points around trust that you're talking about here, that is actually a really key bit in the education of clients. The best businesses I see, the best contractors around the world, are actually very good at that skill. They're very good at educating the clients on how something should be built and why it should be built in that way, as much as they are in building it.
Yeah, and I think to go back to where we were talking about as far as the P70 and getting comfort level at the end of the schedule, and you triggered another thought of mine is, often for customers, the guy that is building the building is not the guy that's going to operate that building. So knowing that our critical path is going to go through somewhere in that handover and those commissioning of those facilities, it would be key to get in with that customer and say, okay, I'm building you this building, but you're going to have a facility manager that's going to be operating it. Can we get them involved? Right? Because when we're dealing with getting that building 100% or parts of that building 100%, getting them involved to understand what they're receiving is almost as important as getting it installed and commissioned. So getting them engaged early is going to make that helpful.
I completely agree. Okay, well, I think we're coming up on time here. Matt, I think there's a couple more conversations in this. I love it. Obviously, the listeners can let us know themselves. I say if you listen to this and you think there's some golden nuggets, let us know. So, we could start a meme, #MoreMatt, something like that.
I think we need to give them a harder challenge as well. We let them off easy in a couple areas. I feel like we could have thrown a couple more curveballs at him and see how he would have done.
Yeah, we could potentially, but I like Matt a lot, so it's just like maybe people no. You're right, Matt. We'll bring you on again, and we can have a much harder one. But just summarizing before we finish, a couple of key thoughts. What do you want people listening to this to take away?
I would say the key thoughts. A lot of scheduling. It's not about connecting the dots per se, right? Scheduling, there's a lot of people, a lot of companies, a lot of people that are all involved with this entire process, and it's understanding where they are, understanding where you need to get to, understanding what the problems are, and then really digging into, okay, how do we get small chunks? Scheduling is a many activities, but when you start to break it down into smaller chunks and you focus on these chunks, enough gains on those little chunks add up to a lot at the end of the project. So try to look at the smaller parts of it, not the big part of it.
Beautiful. Then with that, we'll finish up there. Obviously, like, subscribe. We're on multiple platforms. Share with your friends. If you think that this episode has got some good nuggets, just forward it, and you could also forward the bit in the episode that you like. You can accelerate. You can move the toggle, and if it's 20 minutes, you can send that. Other than that, I'd like to thank Matt for coming on. I'd like to thank American Greg, aka Micah. By the way, for those listening to this, Micah and I wore the same T-shirt, did the same hairstyle, and have the same beard today. So, I haven't changed my look. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh. All right. Fair enough. But anyways, I'm just doing a better job of it. That's all I got to say. You're the GC that got kicked off site, and I'm the one who was brought in to fix the problem.
Thank you guys for having me.
Absolutely.
Pleasure.
All right, folks.
See you everyone later.
Have a good one. See you next week.
Right.